A very warm welcome to tech goddess Martha Lane Fox. Please welcome her.
Thank you. Yeah, define goddess, I think. Define goddess.
Well, I'm sure you've all had a wonderful lunch. It's great to see you all. And we are so thrilled, Martha, to have you with us on stage today. We've got 45 minutes. We're going to do 30 minutes of me asking some questions, and then we're going to throw it open for your questions. So we would love to hear from you. We can get your questions on the iPad, and also there'll be a roving mic also to take anything from the floor that you'd like to ask. But Martha Lane Fox doesn't need much of an introduction, but as you will know, she had a very big day yesterday in her role as President of the British Chamber of Commerce with their conference welcoming Keir Starmer, Jeremy Hunt, and many others. And she's been talking on air recently quite a lot about what's gone on at the CBI. Martha's in the right place here, having founded Lucky Voice, so maybe she'll give us an aria, as well as lastminute.com. We've got 45 minutes to see what she can sing, classical music style.
Don't stop believing that counts as the #1 song at Lucky Voice. I don't think it would be welcome yet.
You never know. They are broadening out. Also, of course, the youngest female member of the House of Lords.
Not anymore.
When you were made.
Not anymore.
When you were appointed, amongst some of her amazing achievements. And the thing that we are going to look at, in part, is what makes a good company. Does it matter? And I'm going to kick off with a question that you might have heard Martha talking about on air in the last few days, and that is AI, and how that is going to change the future of work, how that's going to affect the workforce, and whether that's going to make it harder for companies to be good if they still want to. But first of all, let me just ask you, Martha, what do you define as being a good company, and does it matter?
Yes, it matters. Just put that straight away into a box and let's not think about that question again. Of course it matters. And I think I was reflecting on this when Octavius asked me to come and join you, and I was thinking when we started lastminute.com back in 1997-98, didn't even occur to us to think about what the purpose beyond for customers might be. Didn't even occur to us, right? I mean, partly because we were 25 and I didn't know anything, but also because the dynamics then were very different. You know, I don't think there was nearly as much conversation about your impact on wider stakeholder group. We didn't think about the fact that travel agents was going to be word out of business because of what we were trying to do online. We didn't think about the fact that we were whizzing people off to New York for £99, and was that great for the environment and the planet? So I think it's one of the most fundamental shifts in the last 25 years that I've seen, is this marrying of purpose and profit, if you like. And it's just going faster and faster, in my opinion, because of lots of different reasons. Many of them you've discussed here today, I'm sure, and many of you will be expert in, not me. Your customers, your employees, your wider shareholding base, formal metrics, not formal metrics. So it's brilliant that that's happening. It's not happening fast enough, in my opinion, but it's happening. And so yes, I don't think you can have a business unless you are a good business, and by that I mean you think about your wider responsibilities in society.
And of course, I should have mentioned that Martha was on the board for some years of Twitter, right up until recent huge change. So we will come on to that too.
What change?
Did that change from being a good company to maybe a less good company? And, what is its trajectory? So lots of questions around that. But in terms of having a purpose, as you said, there's been a big debate around this for the last 2 decades. When you look at what's going on now, there's a lot of pressure from employees, from shareholders, and because of much more transparency generally. Is there also, though, a risk within corporate cultures of virtue signalling, of greenwashing, without there being genuine changes in culture? How much of that are you still seeing?
100%. I think there's a myriad of different things happening according to the scale, size, sector, country of the company you're talking about, right? But big FTSE 100 businesses, many of which I think are probably in this room, now have this tension of shareholders looking at a bunch of metrics, ESG metrics. They may or may not be right, but they're probably better than what we had before, which was nothing. So at least it forces you to think about some of these things. In my opinion, there are other things that companies are doing that are really interesting. I chair a business called WeTransfer. It's a kind of mid-sized tech business. It's based in Amsterdam, and it's a registered B Corp. And the B Corp movement, I don't know, I'm sure many people here know about it, but it's a really tough accreditation process across lots of dynamics, from diversity, sustainability, governance, very specific kind of net neutrality, carbon neutral product targets, but also specific things around how you reward employees, what your workforce looks like, and so on. So that is a very, very detailed and hard piece of work to go through as a company. So I think we have got lots of examples of what you can do to show that you have a depth of really deep commitment to some of these topics beyond just those ESG metrics. And I think that the general direction of travel, though, is still that there has to be more reporting and there has to be more just general openness about what you're doing as a company. It's just very different to 10, 20, 15, 20 years ago.
And I know that you write quite a lot, and you've written about some of your own dabbling, I guess, with politics whilst running a company. How much should companies be engaging with social justice objectives or resisting demands from staff to do that?
I think this is such a tricky and incredibly kind of panic issue because, again, looking through my weird career, it's one of the biggest shifts. I think I was remembering that it must have been the Iraq War when I really went turbo psycho in lastminute.com, and I stuck up pictures everywhere saying no to war, we're all going on the war, anti-war march, and Brent, my co-founder, who is a wonderful person but has quite different politics to me. He didn't support the war, but he has quite different politics to me. He was like, will you stop telling everybody that they have to come out on a Saturday and march against something? Just stop it. I was like, no, this is one of the most important issues of our time. That's the luxury, I guess, of being an entrepreneur, is that you can force that on people. But now it would be way, way more complicated. Way more complicated. And I think about this a lot. I naturally tilt into things, and I like the idea that a company is engaged in its community, and that's one of the reasons I love being president of the British Chambers of Commerce, because the businesses I meet feel very responsible at a local level to the education system in their local town, or the unemployment issues in their local area. So that's very rewarding. But I also have real sympathy with companies that have just decided, nope, we're not going to do that. And one famous example that people may know here is Coinbase. Do people know the Coinbase example? Which I found quite interesting. Again, I'm not sure this is what I would do, but the boss of Coinbase wrote a very articulate, careful letter. Some people ripped it apart, inevitably, but saying work is for work. And we're not going to talk about politics at work. On the private work Slack channels, we're not going to talk about work. You can do whatever the hell you like when you're not in this office, irrelevant. But at work, we're going to talk about work. And I have some sympathy with that. And he got really torn apart for it. But I think it is really difficult to navigate as a leader, where you step in, where you use your voice. You've got employees saying, why haven't you said anything about blah? Somebody called me the other day that I work with and said, the company was really upset because I didn't send something about the Queen dying. I was like, what? This feels like completely removed from what I would normally be thinking about as a leader. He goes, yes, everyone's cross with me that I didn't say that they should be able to have some time out to think about the Queen. I was like, oh my God, okay. So it's a minefield,
yes,
as you can tell from that rambling answer.
No, that's a very revealing answer. And of course, so much of this rests with the CEO. I mean, I know in my workplace where impartiality and neutrality is critical, there's been debates about how much you can talk about Black Lives Matter, whether we're allowed to go on marches for pride, or all these sort of identity politics issues. And these decisions ultimately rest with leaders at the top.
Yeah.
How much do individuals matter?
Completely. Again, maybe it's because I've spent more time in founder-led businesses, or businesses actually where the founder is still very dominant. So we have Claire here from Chanel, which I'm on the board, and I've been completely amazed at how at Chanel Coco lives through everything, doesn't she, Claire? She's always in the meetings with everybody, this strong sense of a founder. So dead or alive, they're still there. But I'm also very lucky that I've worked with founders directly. And it's, in my opinion, nearly impossible to escape the founder of a business if they're still in it, or the person that was very early into that founding team, because they have the kind of moral authority, they have the credibility, they have something in the DNA. So it's really important, fundamental. But that is just as true if you are a CEO coming into a role where the founder is long gone, and that's not kind of the psyche of the company. it matters completely, and bosses can change everything, as we have seen at Twitter.
So, Elon Musk, we have to come on to
Yes, my favourite.
Tell us
might
what you can.
Might go back into PTSD about something might happen on the stage.
Tell us what you can about that company, and does that stand as an example of something that has shifted, in your view, from good to less good? Or is that far too simplistic a definition?
I think a bunch of things have happened. I don't know yet if it's going to turn into a good or a bad company. It's too early to tell. I think that Twitter has gone through this massive cost restructuring, fundamentally, right? And Elon has ripped out, I think the latest count is about 5,500, 6,000 people. All the other tech bosses in Silicon Valley are looking, saying, can we do that? Can we take away 90% of our cost base and basically keep our service going? So that is the fundamental thing that has happened, in my opinion. All the free speech stuff, yes, there's been a lot of noise about it. He's clearly screwed up some things about the advertising, all that. But fundamentally, it's been a huge restructuring of the cost base, in my opinion. And it's a bit too early to tell, I think, how that shapes out and what he builds on top of that. But what I do think, and I hope it's not too indiscreet to say this, is that the personality of that person does matter, especially such a huge dominating person. And I know that all the decisions are going back up to him. People don't have as much autonomy as they did in the past, which may have been too much autonomy. So it's definitely an enormous cultural shift, and it goes directly to the character of that person. And it's just funny to watch, frankly, because as I said to you before when we were talking, no one joined the board of Twitter to uphold the law in Delaware, but that's what we ended up having to do, right? And this was a complex board. It was incredibly intense work. I chaired a bunch of committees. I sat on the transaction committee. It was a bit like being an executive in the last year. But I can honestly say I did it because I'm interested by Twitter and the phenomenon of it and its social purpose, not because I thought I was doing a great job for Goldman Sachs, which it turns out I was. So there we are.
Do you, how much do you worry about social media, Twitter, and politics? We've got, election potentially here in the UK next year, in the US next year. This is all going to ramp up, isn't it, massively?
Yes, it is. And it's not just Twitter. I think that when Elon was talking about Twitter, he was often suggesting that Twitter unlocks democracy, and I think that slightly overemphasizes its role in the ecosystem. But clearly, there are now these new channels that are immensely complex. You look at TikTok, that is actually way more fundamental now in how young people particularly are making decisions. So it's...
Do you think it should be banned, TikTok,
I don't think it, no, I don't think it should be banned, but I think we should be very careful, very careful. And
India bans it.
Yes.
Governments obviously here have
circling, thinking about it. I only say no, it shouldn't be banned because that's not naturally what I feel is the right solution to many things, banning them. But separating the ownership structure properly, moving the management, all those things feel like demands that are right. And I think the scales have fallen somewhat from my eyes recently about the level of manipulation. So I'm not sure how many people here watched. There was an amazing, I think it was CNBC, but it might have been another American news network that did a thing about TikTok. And it's not what you might imagine, which is being fed loads of hate about the US. It's quite the opposite. TikTok was positioning content to Chinese young people about maths and science and the brilliance of going into space and invention and all this stuff. And they were sending makeup tutorials to the American children. And they were programming the algorithm to dumb down the content. So it wasn't that the content was all nonsense, some was, some wasn't, but much, in my opinion, more scary than that. It was just eroding something about ambition and motivation and what you can sit scrolling through. So it's complicated.
It's a very, very contentious, a very contentious area. When we bring it back to companies here right now and how you manage staff in this age where actually managing anyone feels very difficult because partly of social media, because of WhatsApp groups, because of transparency demands. And we then look at the problems around, for example, the CBI or Dominic Raab or a story that I've just seen on the BBC News website in the last 2 hours about individual bosses and how they communicate with staff. In your view, is it becoming more and more difficult to manage anything, almost ungovernable? There is a lot of talk about that, isn't it? About companies and society and governments on a more wider level.
No, I don't think it's ungovernable. I just think you have to be very careful. Just be appropriate. And if you have any doubts, don't do it. That seems to me like a fairly good rule. I was laughing because Geeta emailed me to say, would you like to meet up or shall I talk to your team? And I was actually just sitting on my iPad in my dining room with my tortoise and my 2 Bengal cats who were my team. So my management skills wouldn't listen to me because I can barely
That's
manage.
The team.
Exactly, that's the team, the tortoise and the 2 Bengal cats. Again, this is a huge change in the last 20 years and really depends by sector, by scale of business and all those things. But I don't think it's difficult to be a good person. And I don't think it's difficult to show empathy for others and lead with heart and purpose and clarity and compassion and not be inappropriate. So if in doubt, don't do it. And I think that too much we still have people, sometimes maliciously, sometimes mostly not maybe, just not thinking carefully enough. And maybe it's just about being that really intentful.
Is there a conflict though for all companies, or for many companies, between being good, being ethical, being kind to your staff, training your staff versus the bottom line, the profit?
No, I don't think so, because when I say you need to be good, I don't think it means you have to be soft necessarily. You can always be kind, but you can be tough, right? And I think clear performance management, very clear appraisal processes, feedback, all the things that people in this room are expert in, not me, they're the things that matter. I don't think that means you are not a good business. You can 100%, in my opinion, lead with thought and mission and your impact on the wider world that you're contributing to, at the same time as being very clear about what you want from people, managing them to do it, and if not, being generous and kind when they don't succeed. So I don't think those things are in conflict. I think you can have a culture that can feel tough and competitive, but can be a kind culture.
And in your role as president of the Chambers of Commerce here, and with what's going on with the CBI, do you think exposure, transparency in all companies and in so many organizations now is going to mean that that behavior, that changing culture is going to have to come fast?
Yes, and it's, there's a huge spectrum, isn't it? I think it's very important not to conflate, the leader of the CBI maybe being a bit inappropriate with what they was doing on Instagram. I'm just repeating what he said. Getting people to go to karaoke versus people alleging very serious sexual assault. Those are wildly different and they need to be treated as such, right? And this side, we need to do some work around, and this side is a completely different thing. So I just think that's very important separation. Sometimes they get conflated together.
Yeah.
But the truth is that this work of changing cultures is detail-oriented. You're not going to win medals for it. It takes a long time, and you have to keep measuring it and doing it carefully. So it's not something that can happen overnight, I don't believe. You can change leaders, you can change people, but you still have to do the bottom-up work to make things different. And that's true, if we look at what's happened with, I'll just take something clearly that I understand more, which is women in the workplace and women in different places. I think the thing I get asked more than any other thing, particularly by delete as appropriate, white male CEO, tech bro CEO, tech founder, whatever it is. What can we do, Martha? What can we do? I'm like, you can't do one thing. It has to be a whole selection of things across the whole spectrum, from how you write the adverts recruiting for jobs, to how you appraise people, to how you give them feedback, to how you reward, all the stuff. Everything. And then they're already glazing over when I've got to the second of my points, right? Because that's not very appealing, but that's the truth of it. So we've still got a long, long, long way to go. And I tell this just as a funny story, but it's, if it happens to me, it's happening way worse to somebody who's working as a cleaning contractor in a company where they have no power at all. But I was at a security conference recently. I know, completely nuts, but I was talking about the threat of the internet. And I stood up and I made my speech, and then I sat down and I looked around and thought, oh my God, I am the only woman in this room. The only one. So I said to the up to then very friendly general I was sitting next to, that's really depressing. How can it be that there are no women in this room? And he looked at me and he goes, well, it's not a very girly subject.
What did you say?
I was uncharacteristically completely silent.
Speechless, yeah.
Yeah. I do, however, have 2 sticks, so I could have beaten him to a pulp, but I didn't.
That's
but
astonishing.
And this is recent, and this is to someone like me who has power, and we've got a long way to go.
We have, indeed. I think many of us here would agree with that. On to AI, which is a thing that actually I could talk to Martha Lane Fox for several hours.
Probably have more fun talking to a chat version of Martha Lane Fox, I think.
I have 2 teenage boys, both one doing English literature at university, the other one also wants to do English literature at university. I've totally failed to create young tech, digital, native potential superstars.
No.
Are they going to be unemployed?
No, they're not, because guess what? In my opinion, smart people who are curious and well-educated and interested are always going to be just fine. So that's the bottom line, right? There are going to be a bunch of people who are not, of course, and work is going to shift and change. But I think for, frankly, privileged people like us, they're going to have even more opportunities to do more amazing things. And I think that the world is becoming more exciting for a certain class of person. I don't mean social class, I mean, like in a group.
To do with education and
education, opportunities, and exactly curiosity and all those things. So I have twin sons of 7, so 10 years behind yours, right? And my partner is always like, I'm really worried. They're never on the iPad, but he's got this kind of existential threat of the iPad, right? And I'm like, you are smoking crack, my friend, because it is not an iPad that's going to be the problem for them. It's going to be something completely different that we won't know anything about this anyway. So the only thing, in my opinion, that you can do, and this isn't a parenting thing, this is just about the world, is keep curious and keep actively engaged, not be passive in it, because I think that's why we've ended up in some of the muddles that we've ended up in. And I really respect, I've got an amazing colleague in the Lords called Beeban Kidron, who's done a massive amount around children and campaigning about technology and so on. I disagree with some of the things she thinks, but she's done an amazing job at putting this bang in the middle of an agenda. But I think, I don't know, but what I think she might say is part of this happened because we were all a bit asleep at the wheel. We didn't work at what our children were doing. We were on our phones. I laugh all the time when I see my friends going, oh, they're on their phone all the time. I don't know why they're on their phone. Like,
I know. My children tell me off for being on the phone.
So I don't want to moralize about it, but
no.
Just stay curious. Stay curious.
I stupidly banned mine from technology when they were little, and now look at them doing a humanities subject.
No, perfect. That's perfect.
But for all the people in this room, are they going to be finding that workforces are going to have to hemorrhage staff? And is there a possibility ahead that companies will massively increase productivity at the expense of human resources?
Yes, everything will happen. I don't know what it's going to be like. Goldman Sachs released a report recently saying 400 million jobs lost, and this kind of hyperbole about stuff that may or may not happen in a time frame we may or may not understand. I think that work will change dramatically. I don't know. I can't plot exactly what that looks like, of course, because it's way too complicated. Some things will become much more productive, but that might mean that an individual can become much more productive rather than their work just goes. So I find the example of coding quite interesting because you said, your kids couldn't code, and there's been a real kind of philosophical pressure from government that kids must learn to code. This is going to solve our digital skills problem, right? Well, no, not true, because AI is now going to be way better at coding than any kids. That's not helpful. What's helpful is to be asking questions about tech, to be engaged with tech, to think about technology. So I think the role of a coder, just to use it as a specific example, very highly paid right now, very hard to recruit. Everybody wants the AI coding superstars. Lots of people think that I trust who are smart, that actually they're just going to become even better at their jobs. It's not that their jobs are going to completely go, but they're going to be able to do way, way more coding, and they're going to produce way, way more stuff. And those bottlenecks in companies when everybody's like, sorry, it's going to be Christmas till your IT project is done, might suddenly be freed up. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think what I feel frustrated about is that the debate seems to go to either like everything's going to be amazing or everything's going to be absolutely catastrophic. And of course it's not going to be either. We need to keep engaged with this stuff. We need to play with it. We need to regulate it. We need to think about it differently. But it's not going to be one of those two extremes. It's just not.
We've seen a lot of warnings in public in the last few days about, should governments step in to legislate, regulate, the risk of obviously any of this stuff falling into the hands of bad actors.
Yes, it already has. It already has. I mean, bad actors are going to get this stuff and have got it already. So it's not to say we shouldn't be worrying about that. We should, but that's what we should be worrying about, in my opinion.
How fast, though, is life, my job, everyone's job going to change as a result of AI?
Well, I think if you'd asked me that even at Christmas, I think I might have given you a different answer. But now, here where we may, I think that for certain people, it's going to change a lot. But again, I think I'd put it back onto the individual, because there will be some small startups that are going to use this stuff really effectively and take down their competitors way faster than I think anyone imagined. So I gave this example, so I'm sorry if somebody's heard me talk about this before, but I built myself a website. I'm not a coder, and I changed all the articles I've written recently into a podcast series using my own voice, and I did that in 45 minutes using some pretty easy to access GPT technology tools, right? 45 minutes. So arguably you could say, well, that's amazing. You've made yourself 10 times more productive. There can be more Martha everywhere. That's got to be a good thing. But obviously all the people that before might have helped with some of that stuff, that's a bit more profoundly anxious making. So I think that things are going to change, but there will be tiers of people that are using them and using them effectively and will just be turbocharged, and people that aren't. And as you may know, I've been interested for the last decade in helping the next wave of kind of society get digitized, if you like. And that's what I think is super important, because this could be transformative in the education system, the healthcare system, in Parliament, all these places that tend to lag. Yes. So wouldn't it be amazing if we just flipped that and became early adopters?
And key to that, and what Mind Gym obviously look at a lot is whether technology or psychology are going to be helpful in promoting all companies, or whether it is going to be a combination of both. Because you could argue that the tech is going to be available to everybody, and if you want to get one over your competitors, it then does come back to behavior, mindset, and how you run a company and how you train your staff, including your older staff.
Definitely. It's always been a combination of the two, hasn't it? The tools and the brain, I guess, and I think it will become even more so. And the AI is only as good as the data in it. One of the things that you may have followed, the Open AI, the one that was released on the world before Christmas, is a limited data set. It works off its own data set. And then Google this week released this new thing, Bard, I don't know, maybe people have played with it, which uses the entire data set of the internet, and they're completely different experiences. But I mention it because actually I was thinking about Google, I was thinking Bard is much more of a human experience in a way, because you've got the entire of human experience on the internet that it's feeding off. So you always need that interrelationship between technology and psychology, and in the end, motivating people comes from people, in my opinion.
Well, on that note, we're going to open it up to questions from you. We've got 15 minutes. And I don't know if someone's got a microphone or whether we need a microphone. We have. So if anyone would like to put questions to Martha Lane Fox, please, put your hand up. Let's go in the middle there. Thank you.
Can you sing your question in the style of a Lucky Voice karaoke song?
Not with these dulcet tones. Kat from Facebook.
Hello.
In terms of AI, and I truly believe it's going to fundamentally change and level out the playing field and how we learn and develop. Curious as you talk about the educational system, and I think it was last week, Korea have just launched its first metaversity, so completely built through AI or AR and VR. How are those conversations happening in our educational system now?
Thank you for asking me that question, because I'm Chancellor of the Open University, and I would argue that the Open University was the first metaversity back in 1968 when it was founded by Harold Wilson, because it was described then as the University of the Air, because it was all on, it wasn't physical. It was all in television and radio and all the different tapes and so on. Now, the Open University has got to reinvent itself and keep changing and using the technologies that you mentioned. But we have some amazing things already in this country. It's back to my point, we just need to enable them with forward-facing technology and enable them to feel as though they're in control of it, not being eaten up by it. So I think we have these opportunities, and I feel very loyal to the OU as this incredible tool for social mobility. Wouldn't it be fantastic if it reached more people because of the beliefs and the technologies we see?
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi there. Hi, I'm Kath Ennis. I'm at WPP.
Hello.
I wanted to ask you a bit about what you mentioned earlier about the importance of individuals. I work for an industry that possibly invented greenwashing and also employs a huge number of people with a huge amount of purpose, so particularly younger people that are actually refusing to work on some of the major clients we have. Because they want to, their purpose reflected internally. Yeah. So I'd love your thoughts and comments on that.
Yeah, I find that really inspiring, don't you? I mean, again, going back to one of those dramatic shifts over the last 20 or 30 years, and I'm thinking about, again, my weird working life, I don't think it occurred to us at all at the early days of Last Minute what we were offering to people beyond this kind of crazy ride to be involved in the internet. And now when I talk to, my godchildren always going into work, or young people that I meet, that's the thing they care about. And of course they do, because they've got this catastrophic climate crisis sitting on their shoulders. So I find that really inspiring, and that's why I think when you ask me about, does it matter? Of course it matters. That we shouldn't be even having that debate anymore, because otherwise we won't have any employees, and we certainly won't have any customers quite quickly. So I completely agree with you, and it's what I see as well. And it shouldn't be a competitive advantage to be able to say to young potential recruits, this is what we do that's good in the world. It should be absolutely fundamental to everybody, but still feels like there's choices there people are making.
Is there a danger, though, of potentially kowtowing too much to that culture? I mean, it's very difficult to say that every single commercial company is going to have a grander purpose. You can try, companies try to dress it up like that, perhaps, or describe it like that, but that's not going to be the case everywhere all the time for everybody, is it?
I'm not sure I agree with you. I agree with you that not every business can maybe wrap itself up in what I might find appealing as the grander purpose, right? But every single business right now needs to have the purpose of what it's contributing to the planet and the next chances of survival over the couple of decades. Absolutely and unequivocally, in my opinion. So it doesn't matter whether you're doing something that might seem quite dry or isn't consumer-facing. You've got to come back to, hold on a minute, we're staring into something that we've never stared into before, ever. And AI, yes, but that's going to be irrelevant if the planet blows up. So that's what I would put as the kind of bedrock of everything.
Yes. So in terms of climate, you can find purpose for every single
absolutely.
company. Yeah, very good point. Was there another question at the back of the room there? Yes. Thank you. I was caught up in a forest fire a couple of years ago, so I have witnessed the sharp end of climate change. I was just telling Martha it was brought home very really for me. But carry on.
Thank you. You've mentioned... Hi, Jorge from Sage.
Hi there.
Here in the back. You've mentioned if in doubt, don't. But how do you decide what you comment on or not? Because like I said, it's difficult for leaders and so forth. So I'm just curious, what's your compass to make a decision on what you will comment on or stay away from?
Well, I don't think I was really referring to me, to be honest. I was thinking about leaders who might be thinking, is this appropriate or inappropriate? I think if you're having that discussion with yourself, probably it's inappropriate. I wouldn't. That's what I was making, a more trivial point, perhaps. For me, personally, I make decisions around probably these three questions. Firstly, is this something that I think I'm going to look back on in 10 years and feel proud of and feel as though it's contributed to something positive? Have I got the right people in the room? Don't want everybody to look and feel like me. That would be a disaster. Is it opening the door to people that haven't had the opportunity that I've had? And then, am I using the tools of the modern age to do a good job? So am I behaving in old-fashioned behaviors that might be more akin to 1823, not 2023? So those are the kinds of things I use to help me make decisions, and then just try and be kind and work hard. If it's no great, incredible insight there for you, a bit platitudinous, but I do go back to that.
They are good ground rules.
Yep, they're good ground rules, as the 7-year-olds will tell you. Yes, Mama.
Yes, thank you for that. Any more questions from the floor, or if anyone would like to tap anything into the iPad, we can read it out. Whilst we are, Martha, and whilst anyone's thinking about it, on the sort of future of work, when we see the change, and again, questions for companies here in the room, can you give us an idea of time frames by which time you think you're going to see companies having to make a decision about losing chunks of workforce?
Again, if you'd asked me this at Christmas, I'd have said 2 to 5 years. And now I think it's going to be 5 to 10 years, and I think now it's going to be 2 to 5 years.
Right.
And not all bits of it, but I go back to again and again, and I'm sounding a bit doom and gloomy, I don't mean to at all, but if we were starting lastminute.com now, or I was starting anything I've started, not maybe a karaoke joint, but starting lastminute.com, we'd have a very different looking finance function, we'd have a very different customer service function, we'd have a very different sales agent function. Lots of these things would just look different. There wouldn't be no people, but they would look very different. And rather than, I think, ramping to 100 people super fast, I think we'd probably ramp to 10 or 20. And that's different. That's very different.
And your advice on when you're dealing with those questions about what people can say, what people can do, and having a diverse workforce. A lot of people say have a diverse workforce for its own sake because it makes you competitively better. I know in my workplace there's been a lot of arguments around equal pay, and after the Black Lives Matter furore, and yet it's difficult to get there, and it's difficult to persuade all your staff from minority groups that you are genuine about getting there. And then you also have a cohort of people who feel left behind and overtaken because they, if they are a white male, that they feel that is a problem. I know there's a later session coming up on the whole question of woke, in inverted commas. But identity politics and all of that feels very, very live. And for my teenage children's generation, it's kind of fundamental to who they are and who they will go and work for, I think.
Yep.
Is the company dealing with that stuff well?
Yep.
That is still a massive minefield, isn't it?
Yes. And I don't have an answer. There's not like a one-line answer to this stuff. It's really important to keep talking to people, to be open to talking to people, not to lose sight of younger voices, but not only to listen to younger voices. Sometimes young people are wrong, sorry, but they are, right? They're growing up, they're learning, they're thinking about things. So don't be tyrannized by that as a philosophy, but it's really important to listen to and keep open to different voices. And I do think that where it will shake out is that there will be different cultures that will appeal to different people. So I think the thing that you're saying, which I agree with, is that it will be much clearer. There will be a more obvious kind of set of cultural things that this company displays as its recruitment tools, or we are a company that does blah, whereas in this company it might be, actually we don't do any of these things, and that might be appealing to other people. So I think that's going to be the vector for me, is that it's going to be that you have to show where you sit on that spectrum, and that's what will make it easier for people to make decisions about where they go and work.
Okay. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to send in before I ask more? Yes. Just wait for that. The mic is just coming.
Hi, I'm Priyanka from 3UK.
Hi.
Do you think leaders in the organizations right now have the psychological safety to act and the space to express their own authentic views in this fairly divided world?
Their own, sorry, I missed the key word, their own what views?
Their own authentic views.
Authentic, sorry, I missed that word, authentic. Yeah, again, I'm going to sound really old-fashioned. I hate that word, authentic. I really do. I'm not sure it's very helpful. So as an entrepreneur, again, you come and you show up because you're you, and that's all you have at the beginning, right? Me and Brent were just deploying our own, whatever they were, some skills, some were abhorrent, terrible disasters, but generally you build something around what you are able to do because you don't have any guardrails around you. And I think this kind of expression, bring your authentic self to work, yeah, maybe if you want to, or maybe don't. Maybe just do the work and do it well, and if you feel like you're being suppressed, that's not good. But this whole notion that you have to be kind of whole at work, I'm not sure I buy that, actually. I think you want to feel safe at work. I think you want to feel like if you are in a minority, you're protected, of course, But at the same time, keeping something back is really important, in my opinion. And maybe talking from the scars of having been out there way too much early in my life. But, I think about this a lot. One of the hardest moments at lastminute.com was we'd had this incredible press attention, partly because we'd courted it, candidly. We had no budget, so we'd gone to every single opening of an envelope. And because I was a young woman and because I was in tech, I just got a lot of attention. And often Brent, who was the idea of lastminute.com, was cut out of the pictures, and it looked like it was just me. So all that stuff going on. And then when the company went public, and we were very, 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 very valuable for about 20 minutes, and then the .com world blew up, and I had headlines written about me that, were unbearable. So very reputable journalists would write things like, we should have a dinner party and this woman should be sniper-fired down before she gets to the table, or this woman should be put in a burqa because we've had enough of her crashing the market. And I had 3,000 handwritten letters directed to me telling me I was everything from a bitch to something worse because I'd ripped off them and taken all their money, bear in mind everybody had lost a maximum of £135 because we had to cap the share allocations, which I know is money, but still. And I think about if that had happened now and what the volume of insanity I would have had coming at me. And I only mention that, I know it's sort of tangential to your question, but I put myself totally out there, right? Because I was 25, I didn't really have any thought about the future. And now I look back and I think, God, I wish I'd just held a bit back, right? I could have been authentic, as in enough, but not had revealed myself quite so much. So that might be why I take a funny, different line on it. But I'm not sure I think that word is very helpful.
And I'm just going to finish with, because I think we're out of time now, but I just want to ask you, Martha, you said I think you are a naturally upbeat-looking person.
Yeah.
What are you most excited about in terms of what the new AI and all the new technology is going to open up to us? And you know, what do you tell your young children? What are you most gripped by at the moment?
I'm not sure if it's the technology bit that I feel most excited about. You know, what I feel excited about is that I do still think that we are understanding more about the world and each other and the universe than we ever have in time. And I find that just so fundamentally inspiring. And what spins out of that, whether it's new technologies or space travel or whatever it might be, you know, I go back to the Bengal cats and the tortoise, right? We will know so much more in 100 years about how animals think, about how we interrelate to animals. As one example, those are the things I find hugely inspiring. And so all I say to the 7-year-olds is just keep asking questions. Read, get engaged, look at stuff. We've never had so much opportunity to get information and to hear stories and to travel and to do incredible things. So that is phenomenal.
Yes, well, we all have to get playing with all of this if we haven't already. And I'm going to leave you with one quote from Isaiah Berlin, who distinguished between the fox and the hedgehog, saying, "The hedgehog knows one big thing, the fox knows many things." And I think you all agree, the Lane Fox knows even more. Thank you very much indeed to Martha Lane Fox.
Thank you.